Hello, everyone. Today we are doing a time of collective grief, although virtually. So hopefully you can feel some of the connection even from where you are. Um, I wanted to read an article by Sobonfo Some. She is from Burkina Faso in West Africa and been moved to the US and has been helping Americans relearn how to grieve. I think this used to be a part of our society much more than it is now, because everything is so focused on productivity and also stoicism. And I at least know of stories of more of this like sitting Shiva kind of way of being with one another in our grief, and that being normalized and supported. So I wanted to read some of what she wrote about it in her story, and then I have some reflections for you to think about, journal about, take time as you process your own grief. And anyone that's watching this later, please feel free to journal about it or put it in the email me or put it in Podia if you'd like that to be witnessed. All right. Sabunfo says, for many people, grief is an option. Looking at my own life, I realize it's a matter of life and death. In fact, throughout my life, grief has been an important theme for crying, for food as a child, to dealing with deep pain and losses as I grow older. My earliest memory of deep grieving was when I was a little girl, about 5 or 6 years old. One of my playmates died. I was so shocked and confused by the whole business, especially when I'm told I would never see him in a physical form again. I grieved for a long time, and it just wouldn't stick in my head that my friend had died. Every day I would try to go with the hope to play with him, but he wasn't there. My community would gently say to me, "Do you remember that he died?" And they supported me and grieved with me. Although I grieved for a long time, over a year, it was accepted as a normal part of life. I was never asked, "Aren't you finished grieving yet?" Rather, they would say, "Have you grieved enough? Have you cried enough?" For my people, the Dagara tribe of Burkina Faso in West Africa, we see that in life it is necessary to grieve those things that no longer serve us or people who have left us and let them go. When I grieve, I am surrounded by family reassuring me that the grieving is worthwhile and I can grieve as much as I want. We experience conflicts, loved ones suffer or die, dreams never manifest, illnesses occur, relationships break up, and there are unexpected natural disasters. It is so important to have ways to release those pains to keep clearing ourselves. Hanging on to old pain just makes it grow until it smothers our creativity, our joy, and our ability to connect with others. It may even kill us. Often my community uses grief rituals to heal wounds and open us to Spirit's call. I thought this perspective on grief was natural for everyone until I came to the US. I was with a friend who was having a conflict with her family, and I knew the situation was not easy for her. But one day I heard her alone in the bathroom crying. I said through the door, "Are you okay?" She said, "Yes, I'm fine." I said to myself, "Oh my God, something is not right here." The people who are supposed to support her were not there. I felt conflicted and wondered what my grandmother would do in this situation. I was in my late teens when my grandmother died. I was overcome with so much devastating grief, I was unable to release it. I was stuck in the feeling of anger, betrayal, and even rage. I wondered, how could my grandmother do this to me? Everyone was grieving around me. Though I could not join them, they made a space for me. Everyone took turns caring for each other as they broke down. Luckily, the 72 hours of usual grieving time were stretched beyond 5 days. When everyone was finished, I still had much to grieve, and people were still there for me. Though I began my grieving late, I never felt dissatisfaction from those around me. It is natural that people around you start to grieve when you do. We know that when you have pain, it's not a personal pain, it is a pain of the whole group. We experience a collective sharing so that an individual doesn't need to bear all the weight of the suffering. Many years later, while in the US, I had a relationship crisis. I felt like I was dying. I realized that I was feeling lonely in my grief as my soul, heart, and mind continuously collided. I was not used to giving an intellectual explanation to my grief. I found much relief in various communities here, and when I got home and everyone joined me in the grieving, all of a sudden I felt lighter. There is a price in not expressing one's grief. Imagine if you never washed your clothes or showered. The toxins that your body produces just from everyday living would build up and get really stinky. That is how it is with emotional and spiritual toxins, too. We must remember is that the more these toxins rise, the more we have a tendency to blame or hurt others around us. People never harm others out of joy. They give pain to others because they are hurt or in pain. There can be so much grief that we grow numb and from the unfelt and unexpressed emotions that we carry in our bodies. Unexpressed hurt and pain injures our souls and can be linked directly to our general sense of spiritual drought and emotional confusion, not to mention the many illnesses we experience in our lives. Many of us suffer from medical conditions that are grief related. Grieving, whether in private or in community, has many scientifically proven health benefits, from lowering blood pressure and risks of heart attacks to simply having a better quality of life. We need to begin to see grief not as a foreign entity and not as an alien to be held down or caged up, but as a natural process. As the recipient of someone's grief, we must also understand that it is okay for someone to express pain. In today's world, most of us carry grief and did not even know it. We've been trained at a very young age how not to feel. In the West, we're often taught that to be good girls and boys, we have to suck it up. The consequences are that even with your most intimate and trustworthy friends, you might feel like I am burdening them. Crying in front of others is a forbidden fruit. We learn to compartmentalize our grief because expressing it is an unwelcoming place will only lead to more grief. Let me re-say that. We learn to compartmentalize our grief because expressing it in an unwelcoming place will only lead to more grief. We're taught that the people who are closest to us have no way of holding us when we fall apart. Yet we are born fully knowing how to grieve. We naturally cry to feel better, to unburden ourselves and take a few pounds off our shoulders and souls. If there's a way for everyone to grieve openly, I believe it will also diminish the blaming and shaming that goes on between the races. When you are in the presence of someone grieving, you don't see color anymore. It is a universal language. We are all in pain. There's no need to blame others. Blame, shame, and guilt come from being unable to express our grief properly. How can we pretend to be happy, peaceful, and loving when we have so much pain and grief? I believe the future of our world depends greatly on the manner in which we handle our grief. Positive expressions of our grief are healing. However, the lack of expression of our grief or its improper release is what is at the root of the general unhappiness and depression that people feel, all of which lead to war and crimes. There are things we can do in society to help heal. We can begin by accepting our own and each other's grief. We can have grief rooms and shrines and public places where people can go to grieve. I've seen this happen in different communities in the United States and has worked for them. Churches can have rooms for people to grieve. One of my dreams is to turn places where there have been great and repetitious crimes into grief shrines where people can go to mourn. I imagine Memorial Day not as a day of barbecue, but a day to allow us to deal with our daily frictions, losses, and grief as a community. Communal grieving offers something that we cannot get when we grieve by ourselves. Through validation, acknowledgement, and witnessing, communal grieving allows us to experience a level of healing that is deeply and profoundly freeing. Each of us has a basic human right to that genuine love, happiness, and freedom. That's so powerful. And this is one of my great desires too, is for therapists to not be the only places or one of the few places to hold grief. I think it is really important to be able to release trauma in order to grieve and to have safe healing spaces like therapy to grieve. Obviously, that is really important to me. And I also want to see this expand into our greater society and as a, a larger movement to have these places where we can come and expect to find others grieving and crying. That instead of like altar calls, which I grew up with, have spaces to just come grieve. Um, and also not have pressure to grieve in a certain way, but you can grieve quietly, you can grieve loudly, you can grieve in whatever way you want. And I want to add to what Sabunfo said about her grief around her grandmother, that for her, grief was not until she's able to like face and accept the pain that her grandmother died. But I think the anger and denial um, are a part of the grieving process, but they can make it hard to find the release that we are looking for and that our bodies are looking for. And I wanted to add that there are chemical things that happen in our bodies that are like medicine from crying, from grieving, that our bodies are able to release and move into oxytocin. So, for example, if you've seen the original Inside Out movie, I recommend it. If you haven't, recommend both of them. Um, the main character in that movie is stuck in pain until she's able to grieve. When she's able to grieve, then she's able to find comfort. Then she's able to find release. Then she's able to find a way to hold her loss with what she also has in the present, when she doesn't have to suck it up and have it all together. I would love for that to be more of our society, and I would love to be able to create more spaces for that. As that sounds helpful for you all. And if you find other places where you've found good spaces to grieve, I would love to hear about them and join in with them. Um, for today, I had just some questions to help in your grieving process. To name for yourself either what or who has died, or maybe what it feels like has died, whether that be a dream or a hope or a relationship or democracy, human decency, the death of your idea of humanity or a country. Does it feel like possibly there is a terminal diagnosis for something and you're not sure? And that leaves you in this space of I'm I'm grieving, but I don't know the outcome. And being in this liminal space, this transitional space around that. I'd like you to either think about or write about what has been lost, what you loved about it or took for granted, all that you will miss, or you are currently missing, or you are worried about losing, what feels like it's in jeopardy. And is there a way to have open hands with that, if that feels helpful? That may not feel like the right path for that. What do you need empathically and energetically as you grieve? What do you want to let in that will allow you to grieve and feel safe and supported? What do you want to shield yourself from? What are your medicines? Is that things that help you release your tears? Which I started to say earlier, part of the medicine of tears is that it releases oxytocin, which brings us connection. And I had gone to the example from the Inside Out movie. But it literally chemically brings relief and release and moves us from activated nervous system state to a rest and digest nervous system state. Grief also, sorry, this is going back to kind of things about grief, but grief also prevents trauma. and it releases trauma. Grief in itself is medicine. And what other medicines or supportive things do you have to help yourself survive, maybe even thrive in a period of grief? To keep going, to borrow strength, to be able to lean on others. I'm sorry for the background noise. Where do you have soul space to commune with yourself, to commune with others, even if that's energetically? Where you feel seen in your grief, even if that's reading certain passages, certain writers, certain poetry, certain songs. Songs can be wonderful for grief. The Secret Garden is one that I found really helps me grieve. I found through yoga classes. It's good instrumental music to be present with sadness. And I'll add it to this video if that's possible, or a link to it. And you give yourself permission for anything that you feel or that you need, to allow your feelings to be like guests, to come into and through you, like they're coming into a house and through you, because they are helping you get through this situation, this grief, this fear, this loss, this worry. It takes practice and skill building sometimes in our society, especially where we have not been taught to and given spaces to be on a soul level or sink down into the space where we can grieve, to be able to do that. And so if you've made it this far, even in this video, and have dipped down this long, way to go. You can be proud of yourself for that. And in the future, feel free to dip down for as long as you feels comfortable, and then go back up. Go about your normal day, distract yourself, whatever you need. There do not need to be any heroics and grief. You don't need to throw yourself into your emotions. We just want to listen to them and allow them to be life rafts to help us through this situation. Thank you for being here with me today. I'm holding your grief from afar. I'm not taking it in, but I am being present with love and witnessing. You are seen, you are heard, you are loved, you are known, and you are not alone. I'll see you next time.